if I get really sort of sleepy, it's because of the spray paint.
Or Jason's talking. Welcome, everyone, people of the universe. Welcome to season 15, part 3 of 3. Woo! I am Paul or P-Bal. Like us, hate us, subscribe to us, follow us in your dreams. I am joined today by...
Hello, it's James.
Hello, it's Jason.
I mean, it's quite the intro, isn't it?
It's quite the costume.
Previously on Talking About, we scored in reverse order. Invisible Enemy 14, Sunmakers 19.5, Image of the Fendal 26.5, which means our current season leader is the season opener, Horror of Fang Rock on 28. And James has passed out because he can't breathe.
I've had to come up for air. Just in case anyone thought I'd been replaced by Ben and you were trying to find it.
Oh, we wouldn't. We'd just drop Jason and you'd be able to see Ben. Anyway, we are here for the final part, and our first story is Underworld.
Mm-hmm.
So, who has got the lowdown on the minions? Not the minions.
Not the minions.
The minions.
Minions.
Minos.
I told you Minos never lets me down. That's from the Wheel in Space, folks.
I'll make a start then. I know James is all costumed up, but I'm going to make a start on this one. So I'm going to start by saying it was all going so well. And then we arrived at Underworld. 4 parts. I'm trying to struggle to say something about it. Listen, I think this is a very ambitious idea here. And, you know, we get a retelling of Jason and the quest for the Golden Fleece. But we've got it with Bristol Boys style, Bob Baker and Dave Martin delivering, I think, a really, really good script. It's just a shame about the visuals. And unfortunately, this is where the cash has gone. They've had to, the Sunmakers have had it away with all the budget, and there's very little left to be able to actually make something that has only got 2 sets and then an awful lot of CSO. In fact, the biggest amount of CSO usage in the history of Doctor Who for one single story. So I think great script, a little bit let down, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along.
What do you like about the script then?
Well, it's for me, okay, it's retelling a story, but isn't that a lot of what Doctor Who's about at times? It retells stories or takes cues from certain things. You know, we've talked about the Hinchcliffe era taking cues from sort of Hammer and sort of, you know, the sort of old movies of the, you know, the Dracula movies and Frankenstein. You know, this is just almost another retelling, if you like, of a fable as such, but just delivered in a sci-fi way.
No, I get what Underworld is. I just wonder, because it's a good script, I just wonder what you liked about the script. What characters or any of the scenes or any of the dialogue? What do you like about the actual script then? Because
I'll be honest, I like the script because it's about the only thing I can like about this story, because I can't like anything else about it. I think I'm looking for redeeming features necessarily in a story. I think, you know, I think some of the storytelling's good. You know, I think there's some good guest cast in this, but it's the only thing I can latch on to, that I kind of trying to look for positives in a story that doesn't have a huge amount of positives sat around it.
No, I'm not criticizing you saying you like the script. I just wonder what you liked about the script. I thought to say that you like the script, you must be like, there's a beautiful piece of dialogue where Leela says this or something. I just thought there might be a point where you said, I like the script because of this.
Well, I like the writing of Bob and Dave. I think, you know, they've come up trumps a few times through the years on Doctor Who. No, it's not a not a prose work of art, but I mean, I don't know. I just enjoy the idea behind the story. I think that's what I like about the script the most in this one.
You enjoy the original myth, is that what you're saying?
I've been watching Jason and the Argonauts on a Saturday morning and went, yeah, I like that.
Oh, I'm called Jason too. I could have an Argonaut.
I mean, I will agree to a certain extent that what they've done is they've taken a lot of legends and, and that we've seen that in stories before, and we will see it in stories again where they've gone down that path and there's a lot of Greek sort of mythology. You mentioned about, Jason the Argonauts. There's lots of things. It's a bit like Horns of Nymon in that respect, where you've got things that are borrowed from mythology. I really struggle with this story on a lot of different levels. Some you have already called out, like the CSO. The CSO in this, we have recently talked about an episode of more recent Who that relied very heavily on sort of digital effects, and there are some really bad ones, particularly where K9 is like floating in mid, because it is the scene they've CSO'd the background, but they've not CSO'd the background very well. So K9 sort of traveling towards the camera, but looks like he's floating through air because it doesn't actually match up with the background that's been put up. So there's things like that. When it comes to the actual story, the story is under length. So there are points where it is really obviously padded out, where they're just like, oh God, we've still got another couple of minutes. So let's do something else or do a quick recap of something. So it feels like it should have been almost 3 episodes or maybe none at all. But, because it almost got cancelled as well. They almost gave the 4 episodes to Invasion and just said, here, have a massive 10 episode finale, which in a way I'm glad it didn't get any more episodes than it had, but it was beset with problems, and it just I don't know, there's so many different things that just don't fit together, although the premise is quite a sound one and one that is reliable. It's how it is constructed, if that makes sense for me.
The conceit of having a bit of Time Lord mythology, especially as we're off to Gallifrey next week, is an interesting one. This is relentlessly dreary. I don't actually care about the CSO. I don't think the CSO is the problem with Underworld. I can forgive any level of awful effects or badly designed monster or anything if the story at the heart is worth telling and is told well. So that's why I'm slightly like, when Jason says he likes the script, I'm like, I don't understand, because I don't find anything in the script that's got a spark or an interest. So it's not like it's a great, it's not like they've done City of Death with a black drape and CSO'd in Paris. No. That would have been a travesty. This feels like it's a lackluster script with an uninspired cast and a dreary production. There is nothing here. And again, this is one of those that I know. I did the whole sort of run on UK Golf first, really. It's a story that I never come back to unless I really have to for some reason. And because not because it's bad, not because it's outright that's a terrible performance, it's because it's just so dreary. Nobody's quite committed to it. I mean, I think the most spirited you get within it is Alan Lake, and it's just a shame that you didn't bring Diana along to play Tala, because that would have lifted this immeasurably. It's just dreary. I think that's my problem. And again, it's like you said, it's not enough material. You wish it were, less. It almost feels like you could have had a 2-part, really, that they crash into it, they go and then they go. You could almost have done this by the end of episode 2, because part 1's all right. It's not great. It's all right because they've got the money for the set and all that. But it's just bland. it's remorselessly bland, and that's why I don't dig Underworld. Even if it inspired the Knicker Factory in Coronation Street.
That probably was a lot more exciting. No, I do agree with you, and I think you're right that there's so much of this story it's not delivering. And I suppose in a way with me, as I said at the beginning of this piece, you know, I'm looking. I always try and look for a positive in any story that we review, particularly the ones that I would class as not the very good ones. And you know, talked about in the last installment, we talked about the Sunmakers and how I wasn't looking forward necessarily to rewatching that one because my memory of it wasn't particularly good. And Underworld is another story that my memory's not particularly good of. I don't, you know, I had very low hopes going into it. And I went into it trying to find some positives in there. And I think I just came out of it with the only thing I could find a positive in was the scripting. And you're right, it's not setting the world on fire as a story. There's no you know, dialogue that's absolutely zinging or outstanding or delivered well by the cast in particular, but you know, the story's held together with the narrative that's based on a myth, and I suppose that's the bit that's possibly a bit about it that I liked. I've enjoyed all those old Ray Harryhausen films, you know, the Golden Voyages of Sinbad and things like that, and it's kind of like probably an era of storytelling that I maybe like. It wasn't done that well, but the script's the best thing I can take out of it.
But okay, I haven't come at this though just to pick it apart. But I think to say that you want to say the positive is fine, and we all of us want to watch something to enjoy it and take something good from it. I think the biggest positive, I think Louise is still really powering through this, and she does a great job in this. And there's the lovely bit where they pacify her, and then she's pissed off that they pacify her, and that's good. But I think so. I pulled out that the script was good. The script isn't that good, but it's a positive thing because it might be based on. It's kind of like that's what I'm not sort of having a go there. It's just like I haven't come at this to be negative purposefully. I mean the stop frame animation sort of versions of the films, like of the original myths, Jason Elgan and stuff like that. You know, you can watch those and say, well, actually, I can tell that that's all stop frame creatures, but they're done with such conviction, and the stories are told so beautifully that you forgive that, you embrace that as a styling. And if this story were told beautifully or well, or felt like it was enjoyable, I'd say, oh, you know, CSO, schmieso, it doesn't matter, because I believe in these characters. I mean, last night, I binge watched the BBC Narnia story, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and that has all those sort of cartoony, sort of, you know, flying horses and stuff, which aren't realistic. It's a stylistic decision, but you engage with it because it's a great story told well, and the cast are great. Even the silly beaver costumes are like, it's fine. I know that's not a real beaver, but I can believe you're a beaver because you're selling it to me, and it feels like Underworld has got nothing to sell you and nobody who's willing to sell it. It just goes on. And it's a shame because I know sometimes people like to say, well, if you watch it in black and white, that it's a lot better. It's like, no, it's not going to make anything any better other than the fraying on the edges of the CSO. And if that's the worry point, then I think you've got to the bottom of the list.
I mean, I went into this a bit like Underworld. I went into this with low expectations, but unlike Underworld, I came out with even lower opinion of the story than I did when I went into it, and it just, I don't know, that like I say, there's lots of different elements, and they just don't knit well together. It's not. I can't just say the single failing is one thing, because it's multiple things. And the trouble when you get to that point is that because they are stacked up on top of each other. So we've talked about stories before where we know the story was dross, but it's been saved by great performances, yeah. Or there's been something that some comedy or a great double act or something that's dragged it up. I likewise we've talked about stories that were very clever, very well written, but the actual performance or the way that it was presented was bad. Unfortunately, I think with this, I think it's both. And I think the CSO compounds that issue as well. It's all studio based. It is pretty pedestrian. It just plods on. And you said it's 4 episodes. Thank God it's only 4, because if they turn out to have 2 more episodes, I don't think I'll be able to get to the end unless something radically changed. I mean, I used to love those kind of Jason and the Argonaut films, and they were action packed, and they you didn't care about, like you were saying, the sort of the animations and things like that, because it was just fun and engaging, and you could just switch off. I found myself drifting off with this rather than engaging with what's actually happening. And I'd probably say you've already said my favourite bit is where Leela gets the ray, and she's really annoyed that they've turned her into a nice person. But I love Louise's change. She's like, oh, hello, she's like, I'm going to come and hug you, and it's really nice. And I think that could have been a lovely end for Leela, is that they've used this pacifier on her, and she fell in love with one of the people in the crew, because of her sort of personality change. I know it doesn't last very long, but it just that I really struggle to find much about this that I go, yeah, I really liked that, because there isn't much, sadly. I'll go back under my hood now.
Back under the egg box. Back under the egg box. It's weird, isn't it? I honestly, aside from that, what I've said, there's nothing. There is nothing I'm calling. I mean, I don't know. Even like Jonathan Newith and people like that. It's kind of like there's no. I mean, they're not doing bad performances. They're not dishonouring. But I just don't think there's anything there to go with. There's nothing that's. It's a bit like that bit where Anna Legg goes, "Oh, hold back. I'll hold them back. I want to do this." And he stands there and he gets shot the second after. He doesn't hold anything back. He gets shot the moment they have left. He might as well have just gone. It's just shonky, and it feels like it's just been thrown together and they've taken the money and they've run with it. It really doesn't feel good.
There wasn't an awful lot of money to throw at it, I don't think.
Well, I think they still get a nice rate for the script, especially having done the script previously. You accrue your rate. Just saying. Do we have any exciting facts about this? We've gone to facts quite early here.
No. I mean, there
aren't even any good facts about it.
I really struggled. There's a scene. There was supposed to be a scene where Leela screamed, but Louise refused to do it because she said it was out of character. She didn't want to do that. No, I mean the most of the budget, we talk about budget restraints, went on the spaceship set. That was it. That was where they spent the majority of their budget, and and it does show in other scenes. Anywhere that's not on that spaceship set, it is quite.
It's bizarre to conceive that a television drama of any time really didn't have enough money left in the pot to just build a couple of polystyrene tunnel walls with a bit of an intersection that they could shoot in different directions and try and give it, at least just a bit of a grounding in even if it was poorly, then it would have been a grounding in a studio set rather than trying. They probably spent longer trying to line up all the CSO and all the technical stuff as they came through it. It would have been cheaper probably for them to have built a very simple cave corridor type design and done it that way.
Yeah, but they spent the budget on kitchen foil for the next episode, so there was nothing left. Couldn't spare anything.
I think the makeup for Imogen Bicford-Smith when she's aged up, that's good. That's well done. I'll say that's a positive. I know there was one of those things, wasn't there, where the agent was pushing her at the time to say she's the new Doctor Who girl. She's going to be taking over from Louise. So I think that was a bit of a friction point there, because it's like, no, bitch, still my gig. I think what I'll say actually here is I'm always mindful with Doctor Who. Like when you do polls, when Doctor Who magazine do their polls of the greatest ever stories and all, you know, that sort of stuff, always sort of in the bottom 10 or so, you always have the Gunfighters, Underworld, Twin Dilemma, Time and the Rani, Time Monster. Usually it's got time in it, hasn't it? There's always a set sort of dozen. If you were on Pointless or something and you had to name a Doctor Who story in the bottom 10 favourites or whatever, Underworld would be a fairly solid bet. You know, fear her. There are a few of them where you know I'm in a good chance of getting this now. Jodie's era aside. I think that I'm always mindful though that when you come to it, that you're not preemptively thinking, well, this isn't something that people generally like. And that was when I was growing up, and you used to get the handbooks, do you remember the David House, Stammers, all that's the handbooks, and they'd all have ratings for the stories. And I always thought, I love it. I mean, I love a rating. I love a scoreboard. I mean, I love the Eurovision. I love a rating, a ranking, and a scoreboard. Love it. It's what it is. So I always used to love reading those, and I'd read those reviews. And of course, there was always that set mindset of they'd all grown up as 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, whatever, watching Patrick Troughton. And so Doctor Who was at its best with Patrick Troughton, and it was good during John. Yeah, and then by the time it gets to Sylvester, it's silly and it's nonsense, and we don't like it anymore. And there's that sort of conceit with their rankings, and that was always the perceived wisdom of it. People always were like, the bad stories, the Delta and the Bannerman, and I think polls and things. So if you say, oh, Underworld's always one of the least favourite, is it because of an accumulated wisdom that people always think that? Which is why it's exciting when you see that the kids of today and they're like, oh, we love Delta and the Bannerman, because they've not come at it with the junk and the baggage. They're just watching it and appreciating it on its own. So that rather long-winded tirade was just to say that I appreciate that Underworld is quite often very near the bottom of these polls, and I mean, God, it's Doctor Who, Leela, and K9, so it's got a start of a 10 anyway. It should be halfway to being decent, and yet even within that lineup, this is desperate. This is terrible. It's an abysmal watch. So I feel a pity. I feel slightly pitiful to be compounding its reputation and to not be sat here going, I understand that you all hate Underworld, but I love it because of this, this, and this, and this. And I can see they're trying to achieve. I feel like it's the hangover from the Christmas office party. It just doesn't do anything.
That's a good analogy.
It was the first story after Christmas. I mean, I went into the editing suite with a baby sham and 2 thumbs. I don't know. Do we have any other last lingering thoughts on the Underworld? I mean, it's not the Kate Beckinsale movie, which is a lot better, I have to say. I mean, the first one, there's about 100 of them now.
Isn't this the one where they talk about why the Time Lords now have a non-interference policy? So it's the sort of explanation of that, because it's a little bit similar to season 20. Yay, callback. Where they've got that race of aliens that are using Time Lord technology to keep regenerating themselves. It's similar to that in that respect. It's Mordred Undead, isn't it? You know, where they're tinkering with Time Lord science, and they're doing something similar. You know, they've fallen out with the Time Lords because of their technology. So there's a little bit of Time Lord mythology, and we're about, like you say, to go to Gallifrey. But apart from that,
do you think the Time Lords have a strict policy of non-intervention in case they have to have dreary stories like this again? They're like, don't interfere, we'll have to do another Underworld. It just, you know, if we have an Underworld, we'll go have an invasion of time, and it just leave them alone. Let them get on with it. Okay, let's go for scores then. One of you two's really got to go for it. Come on. Have we got a seer with a score?
I will go first. So this is really difficult to watch. It is. I had more fun making the cosplay than I did watching the episode, and sadly, I could score it no more than 2.
It's a tempting 2.
Not even tempting.
A tempting 2. Okay, so yeah, lackluster. I think there's a good word for you. Lackluster. I think you're right, P-Bal, the way you summarized it just a few minutes ago. You know, you've got Tom on good form, Louise is on good form, and you've got K9. They should be the recipe for the success. And I think there's just a lot that's technically letting it down. It isn't, you're right, it isn't the best script, but it's about the thing that I've pulled out, that being about the only thing I liked about this particular story, because there's an awful lot else I can like about it.
What do you like about the script? You keep saying it's driving me crazy.
It's just a script. It's a 4-part script. I don't.
I know it's a 4-part. That's like a fact. That's not what you like about it. It is a 4-part script. It is by Bob Baker and Dave Martin, and it is based on a myth. But what do you like about it?
You summed it up. You've just taken it. You've summed it up. I'm just trying to find some positives in amongst, because I'm just trying to find some positives. It isn't, you know, technically it isn't the best, and CSO fringing and the CSOing of it and the whatnot, you know, it's very obviously not a very well-made production, and I wouldn't have wanted to have been the director on this story. It isn't going to be the highest score here by any stretch of the imagination. It's certainly not going to be the lowest. And I think I'm with James on this one. I'm going to go in with a 2.
At least Norman Stewart got to come back and do Power of Kroll, so they didn't give him a turkey the year after, did they? It's dreadful. I think it's nothing I would ever. I mean, I'm gonna have to put it on again for the Blu-ray, I guess. But it's nothing I want to watch for any great thrill. I'm not here to watch Doctor Who and the Underworld. I like the book cover. It always just look quite intriguing, because our library of Usually used to have the hardback. So it looked a lovely cover. Lovely cover for the book isn't going to help it score. I think this is pretty much as awful as Doctor Who and the Terminus, and I have given Underworld 1. For clarity, folks, within the space of 2 stories, I've gone from 10 to 1. I'm like William G. Stewart, but with 5 less people. It's Sandy Toxic now, isn't that? Shows my age, doesn't it? With Sandy Toxic, I'm 15 to 1.
All I can say is the quest most definitely wasn't the quest.
It was not the quest. The quest was to try and get it over and done with as quickly as possible.
So the quest ends with 5, which won't make you get up, so don't sing it. Bye. You're all too old for that. Okay, we move on to the next story, which is Doctor Who and the Invasion of Time. It's chilling. Time's being invaded, or is it? Who's introing this one then?
Was it me? It's probably me, because I had my costume on for the last one. Yeah, so the Doctor has returned to Gallifrey to take his rightful place as president. However, he is not alone. He's brought some extra special friends with him. So we're on to season finale. It's a 6-parter. We're back on Gallifrey, and this really is the story that we talked about. Recently we talked about the first episode that had a Sontaran in. We've talked about, you know, how they come back over time, and this is where you really start to get that sense of, oh, we're on to a winner with the Sontaran, so let's have them invade Gallifrey. Let's make them a really credible threat. And it's really strange, because really from here, I feel the threat goes backwards. I think they become less of a, you know, universal threat. Maybe the 2 Doctors, they want to get time travel, but it's not until more recently that they kind of have a resurgence, and the center of a big plot. But yeah, it's a good story. There are elements of it again where I think it's let down a little bit, and I'm not just talking about the silver foil aliens, because again that's a wonderful budget device. We've got these alien race, and they just silver foil in front of the camera, who then are successful in manipulating the Doctor into doing what they want, and then they are pretty much, they disappear because the Sontarans are really behind it. It's a bit of a, I try not to overthink about that plot.
They don't manipulate the Doctor into doing it, do they? He
read his mind.
He thinks that they are going to invade at some point anyway, and there will always be a threat, so they need to be dealt with sooner rather than later, doesn't it? Is the strange logic.
So they have the ability to read his mind. So he goes along with it because he doesn't want to tip them off that he's going to try and double cross them. But then that I find that all gets sort of like disappears really quickly, and then suddenly you've got the Sontarans who were on Gallifrey who were manipulating them into manipulating the Doctor.
This doesn't at all reek of it being a very last-minute script replacement for a story that might well have fallen through somewhere else. And, I think there's some telltale signs here. You start off in a really odd way because you don't understand why the Doctor's where the Doctor is at the beginning of the story. And you're trying to work out the mechanic of what he's trying to do, even though he's trying to double-cross the Vardans. The Vardans don't trust him anyway, and you see that sort of playing out as you come through. And then you get the Sontarans, because it was a good hook in a 6-part to step the pace up as you come out of part 4 and into part 5 to try and to get you over the last hurdle as you get in towards the back end of the season. It doesn't feel terribly coherent. And the bit I take out of having watched this the very first time all them years ago was I was wowed by the fact we were all over the TARDIS. This is fantastic. We saw other bits of the TARDIS, and it would seem to go to brickwork. And now when you watch it, you think, oh my Lord, they really were struggling here. You have a whole episode just parading around the exterior TARDIS set, if you like, to just try and eat time up. And I think that's part of this. It is the invasion of time, but it's trying to eat some of that time up as you come through it, because it's a bit thin on the plot side. And therefore, this is a really plotty 6-part story.
I think the problem is that the logic fails at so many points during it that it just doesn't hang together. It feels like it's been written week by week without really remembering quite what was said before. So I get that if the Vardans were a threat that he needed to deal with, it's a very strange way of going about it, especially as the Vardans can't get through the barrier to Gallifrey without him destroying the barrier to let them in. He could just go to Gallifrey and say, by the way, the Vardans are really powerful, they're gonna come and get you, rather than actually the ensuing deaths and stuff which happen because he's pretending to be with the Vardans, and all, that could have all been negated by just saying they're a problem. Because it's not like they pacify the Vardans, they get rid of them, they time loop them or something. So why he didn't just go and tell them to do that anyway without having to pretend to be the president, and it doesn't follow. And then to understand that the Vardans, who are these great mind readers, and they just look like 3 slightly depressed men in dungarees, don't they? I can say that in my dungies, but there is just when they are, even to the point where TV's Doctor goes, yeah, they're a bit disappointing, aren't they? He says it on screen. Cover it up, folks. At least pretend that they look a bit frightened. He's like, yeah, it's the Vardans. Look at it. They've gone from tinfoil to disaffected firefighters. Great. So it's that straight. And then just to understand that the Sontarans were just using the Vardans who are using the Doctor who was using the Vardans to get onto Gallifrey was a bit like, well, it doesn't quite. The cliffhanger's great. It's a great moment, isn't it, where they think they've won and hurrah. And ordinarily that would be the end of the episode and be like, hey, Doctor Who's won. Where are we off to next week? So it is the great thing that's a good launch into the final two episodes. But I think slightly like when we watched Monster of Peladon, the Sontarans are the big hitters, and they come in for the shortest part of the story. So much like Monster, where you have 4 quite slow episodes, and then the Ice Warriors, it's the same sort of blueprint here. It's a really, because again, it's not awful. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's not awful. It's just, you can't sit and make sense of it all, because then at the end the Doctor doesn't remember that he's done it all, does he? And
it's all gone from his mind, isn't it? I mean, I love there are some great Time Lords in this. I must admit that there's, this is sort of a continuation from the Deadly Assassins. We've got, I know some of the characters, the actors weren't available, so we've got new versions, and that happens quite a lot when we go back to Gallifrey. But I think you've got Milton Johns as Andred, who's just this.
Milton Johns isn't Andred. Andred marries Leela.
No.
Oh, sorry, not Andred. He's, what's his name?
The Castellan.
Castellan, yeah. Who turned, as soon as like the Sontarans are there, he's such a turncoat. He's just like, oh, you must be really powerful, and I'm going to help you. And it just, and I love the scenes between the Doctor and
Barusa.
Yeah. I love this room, actually. I love the design of the sort of secret room that they've got, and the fact that the Doctor says, oh, I've had it reinforced, and then Barusa goes, so have I, because, I was taking precautions as well. It feeds on from the end of Deadly Assassin, where he goes, Doctor, it's a 9 out of 10 or whatever it was at the end, is still the sort of teacher to the Doctor, but here their relationship it moves on a bit.
And this wouldn't at all be the reason why we're back on Gallifrey at the end of this very budget hit season, because all the sets and all the costumes in the large part of it were all in store and were quite easily brought out and recommissioned for another story on Gallifrey quite so soon.
I mean, Derek Deadman doesn't really fit the Sontaran mask, does he? There are a lot of points for it, and especially through the outer. You can see his face is sort of underneath and a bit back. It's quite a shoddy Sontaran body, because it just doesn't fit him. He's a bit like that, Derek. He's a bit like, I'm Storr, I'm here to get Gallifrey, isn't it? With really cheap looking hands as well, isn't it? Yeah, because he doesn't take his helmet off until episode 6, does he? So I don't know whether they were still trying to fix the makeup up before, because he does the Sontaran reveal, doesn't he, in the console room, and he's the only one who does. But yeah,
I was going to say there's certainly lower grade Sontarans as well. They're not Lynx. We're gone from the days of Lynx and the sort of very well made Sontaran costuming.
Stuart Fell falling over the chair by the swimming pool as well.
Great scene where he recovers really well, doesn't he? Just it's like, all right, I'm carrying on. It's all right.
I mean, I think Milton Johns is the star of this. He does obsequious evil with sort of aplomb, doesn't he? He just does that, and he can work with a little and take it a long way. And it's the exact thing that you sort of wanted somebody in Underworld to just take something in it. So I think there's a lot of good performances in this, and Barusa is very wry and very dryly humorous with it as well. So I think that's helps this along, because as I say, as a story, it's a bit patchy. It's a bit, you just got to imagine that Gallifrey is being invaded, but don't think too hard about quite why it is, and my Doctor Who's acting in any manner of any of it really. To just make a big gun to shoot them at the end as his grand plan.
And it doesn't particularly add anything to the history of the Gallifreyans either. So obviously, if you think back to the Deadly Assassin, it's sort of, it's very heavily laden. It's telling its own story. We've already scored that on a previous video. But this doesn't add anything more to it. It is literally just, where do we set this? Gallifrey.
It does. We hang on a second. Let me just say because we've got the Rassilon merch stall on
Exactly. I thought you got to mention the Rassilon merch.
I mean, the Rassilon merch. I mean, what a top seller that is. I mean, we've got the sash, we've got the rod, we've got the crown, we have the great key. You know, it's
you have the key, but you also have fake keys that aren't the real key. You could collect the set, not the key of Rassilon's. And then if you collect them all together, you can make your own DMAT gun. So, I mean, there's like a subscription service to your Rassilon goodies. It's a Gallifrey giver, this is.
That's why Leela stayed behind. She opened the merch shop. She was like selling everything.
She took out a direct debit on the Rassilon subscription, and she was on her third key. She's like, "Oh, better stop." I mean, and Andrew, bless him, he looks a handsome chap, doesn't he? But there isn't really any point during 6 weeks of this that they even hint really that there's something going there. I think is there a point where he gets shot in the medical sort of bay, and she almost has a moment, only almost. But I mean, it's a lottery as to who she's reaching her hand out behind when she goes, "I'm stopping," and he's like, "Why?" She's like, I mean, if Barusa had grabbed her hand, I wouldn't have been surprised. It could be any of them. The Sontaran had just got back up and gone, "Mate, we've had as much interaction."
It's almost like they forgot that she was leaving, and they rewrote the script in a hurry, and then they were just about to start filming episode 6, and somebody went, "Oh, by the way, she's leaving at the end of this episode."
Well, it's a slight curse of Graham Williams, isn't it? Because Louise said she was going. She said she was definitely going, and he kept saying, "Oh, it's fine. You can stay." And she was like, "No, I've finished. I'm going." And she was straight off to play Porsche. I think she's off to the RSC. So she'd done, and she was like, "I'm done." And Mary had the same thing the year after. She's like, "I've done. I'm not coming back." And he's like, "We'll sack Tom. Come back." And she's like, "No, I'm finished. Ask someone else to. I'm not coming back." So it's the same sort of thing that he didn't take his leading ladies quitting terribly well, because he just must have thought, well, I'm sure they'll change their mind.
Twist their arm and they'll stay.
Which obviously therefore means that, I mean, at least Leela gets a sort of exit, but it doesn't. You'd have thought they'd have even thinking she might stay, a sort of, a cushion that come episode 4, she'd given Andred a saucy wink or something. It'd have made more sense if she'd have hooked it with Roden. I mean, she spent more time with her. She really did.
A very rare female Time Lord at this point.
She's very much a preemptive Romana, isn't she? She's not as sassy. I mean, there are bits when she's fixing up in the console room, isn't she? Which and Hand. There's humour there that's quite sweet, but she is very. You can see, Rodan to Romana. It's not a massive leap.
No, I'd agree. You can see that, and in fact, I did wonder. I don't know if it's documented anywhere in your many facts that you're going to give us later on, James, about whether or not this was actually almost an inspiration for the Romana character.
It's not something I've read or come across, but it could well be that was. I mean, they must have at this point been sort of scrambling around, going, "Well, what are we going to do next?" What? Because there's no sort of crossover in companion, is there? Often you get one leaves and one arrives, and there might be a few stories.
K9, he pulls out a box, doesn't he? And he's like, "This one will not be as noisy as the last one. You'll be able to hear what we're saying when he's in the corridor."
But we don't get to Romana until the start of the next one, isn't it? It's the Time Lords are like, right, you're gonna take Romana with you. So you've got that. There isn't that transition bit, so it's kind of that's it. If you go,
and it's quite an odd leaving sort of departure scene as well between them again, because he's, she very much says, "I'm going to stay here," and he's like, "Okay then." But then you get that bit where the inner doors close and he just says, "Goodbye, Savage," or whatever, and it's kind of like that's the softer side of it there. But it's again, it's just I think it's very difficult sometimes. The leaving scenes that Tom had with his companions weren't necessarily that kind to the companion that was leaving. Then let's say.
They were very abrupt, weren't they? Which is interesting. Even within the Leela Doctor dynamic, they were still friends, and I know people underplay emotions and all that stuff, but there isn't a lot of variant on. You go in, right, here's the dog, have a good life. It's slightly strange, isn't it? Because you would expect him to just a couple of lines of dialogue just to say, well, be safe. I'll see you one day or something. Enjoy my home or something. There'd have been something, or he'd have said to Bruce, it just feels like they're all stood there for the big goodbye, and then she's like, yeah, remember Andred? Do you remember him? He's had 3 lines this week. Married. We are like that. I mean, we've not even touched first base, and we're now going to get married and we're going to live on an alien world. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, and I've signed the contract with the merch department.
Be the wedding ring of Rassilon.
The outer Gallifrey scenes are always, again, they feel a little bit like, oh, put a bit of padding in here. But, where do they live in outer Gallifrey? Do they just walk around in the middle of nowhere? Again, just seems very...
There's supposed to be like an undertown, isn't there? Sort of underneath the citadel, there's supposed to be like an undertown. But then you've got... Because when you get to Capaldi, he's in that, he's got that shed that's in the desert. So people do live outside, outside of the main citadel. But I think it's supposed to be that they are in this sort of underground sort of town.
Again,
maybe a Premier Inn and a Costa there somewhere.
It's the realization of it, though, I think, isn't it? The realization's not great. You're clearly in some sort of sand dune somewhere, and you're running around on a beach.
It's better done on some of the books where the Doctor goes and leaves Gallifrey Citadel and goes into sort of the low town and meets different, Shobigans, is it? Something like that. It's the name of the people. Because originally... this story was going to contain a reference to the Time Lords not being native to Gallifrey, that they came to the planet, and that's why you have these other people that are living outside of the Citadel, which again, Modern Who has played a twist on that, but it never actually made it into the story, so that's not part of the mythology at this point.
So I've got this is where I pick up on the factoids. Do you remember we had the discussion about Ron Grainer?
Yes.
When I watched I don't quite often when I'm doing the reruns now, call me a heathen. When it gets to the end credit, if I'm doing the next episode, I just skip to the next music. But because episode 6 was, running at it right, they credited Ron Grainer. Now, when you said the other day that they don't, I looked and IMDb was, no, I looked and IMDb said, uncredited. It's like, oh, it must perhaps true. But then I thought, well, it's on so have they tinkered with the DVD to put Ron Grainer back, or did they just credit him at the end of the season?
Well, I can tell you, because in episodes 3, 4, and 6, they put the middle 8 back in. So there's a re-tinkering with the theme music, and that's why he gets a credit.
They didn't have budget for a cave set in the last story, yet here they are in this story tinkering with the middle 8.
Well, it's a longer credit sequence, isn't it? Because the end episode, the music plays out a lot longer because there's more people to get through.
Yeah.
So the fact about him not being credited after the Horror Fang Rot wasn't true then?
Well, until he's not credited for the whole...
Till 4 stories later. I saw it. I wasn't to pull you up. I said, because I know with the DVD they quite often, or the Blu-ray, they quite often have a fiddle, and they'll give Delia Derbyshire a credit or something, and it's lovely, but it's not necessarily how it went out. So I did wonder whether it was the case that Ronnie had been credited or not. But anyway, that was that. I don't mind the outside bits of Gallifrey. I like the fact they've oranged it up and give it a little tint, and I think it looks quite nice, a bit sand duney. It's got to look a bit rustic. Gallifrey's a bit Dallasy, glitzy, so I don't mind that. The funny bit with the sets on Gallifrey, I find in this is the amount of times where someone's got to chase someone, but there's some dialogue going on at the front of the set that they have to deliver whilst the other person sort of waits to chase them, because they can't, if they start running when the dialogue starts, they'll have caught them up. So there's a lot of sort of kind of like slow, shall I chase them? Shall I not? Shall I not? Shall I? And cue, and then off they go. And it's like, yeah, it's quite a small scale thing, but yeah.
Particularly noticeable in a couple of the scenes when the Sontarans are chasing the Doctor.
Yeah. Sort of a loss of anything else to add to this. Do you have any other facts which we can later verify for the viewer?
So this was a replacement last minute for a story called Killers of the Dark, which was originally going to there was going to be a native species of cat people that lived on Gallifrey, and that the story was going to be related to them, but that all got pulled. Robert Holmes turned down the chance to write for this. They reached out and he was like, no. Talked about the Middle Eight. Yeah, that's pretty much it, in addition to what we've already talked about.
And the revelation that the TARDIS had a swimming pool.
Yeah, I mean, I like, I think I've said this before, I like episodes which have got like other TARDIS areas, but it does feel like they're running for us like a leisure centre. It's you just, I mean, I say I love this design, this sort of, all the gears on the wall and stuff like that, and there are some really nice bits of sets, but it does, there are bits where you're just like, really?
I just wish they'd had, like the Hartnell photo blow-ups, if just a couple of walls in the hospital, they just put just a hint that there was some kind of TARDIS wall, just to say that, this is part of it. Because it does just distinctly have the console room, a black corridor, and then it's very much, the abandoned hospital and the swimming pool. It doesn't, if you just had a hint of it, you don't have to cover it all with roundels, but just the odd wall here and there, just to suggest that this was still in the TARDIS, it would have helped it a little bit. I mean, have you ever dared to watch the film trims on the DVD? I mean, Tom Baker walking around that corridor, I mean, it's you could be numbed by it. The amount of outtake material. We don't have episode 4 of The Crusade, but we do have Tom Baker walking around an abandoned hospital, round and round and round and round and round, in crystal clear clarity.
I do wonder, actually, if there was a reference made in is it the previous story where he's decorating, he's obviously been painting something, he's decorating somewhere, and then all of a sudden we get this reveal the following story where we've got all these TARDIS interior scenes, whether he was sprucing it up in readiness.
Doesn't look terribly spruced up though, does it? I'm just going to get this dusty old sort of gloss brick look and dirty floor.
That's what he was configuring, I think.
And the scene with the Sontarans are chasing him through the hospital is just, it's weird.
And there's some really bizarre bits, like all the paintings and the statue all just disappear off the wall, and there's no real explanation as to why. They press a button and they all just disappear, and it's like,
because he was hiding the thing, wasn't he? He was hiding the control.
Yeah. But it's kind of, again, it just feels, I don't know.
Mr. Fendelman told him to do it.
Hey.
Mr. Fendelman? Who was he?
I don't know, but it's such a coincidence that his name was literally like the monster of the piece. It was so similar.
Oh, this is going to be in Quark. This is Quark-esque in its size, isn't it, this one?
Did you not know Mr. D. Alec?
No, Davros, when he's in his chair, that chair is just like a Dalek. I mean, you thought someone would notice, wouldn't you? The skirt of Davros's chair is like a Dalek.
I'm learning so many things doing this rewatch.
Anyway, Yeah, it's a shame because I mean, crikey, when TV's Doctor Who in Logopolis decides to jettison one room, he picks Romana's bedroom, which is lovely and decorated and it's got all her things in it. He doesn't get rid of the old knackered out medical bay. He doesn't get rid of one of the old sort of walking around sort of corridor storage units. No, I'm getting rid of Romana's room. She's gone. She smited me. Her room's going. Yeah. Anyway, I suppose we're supposed to believe that's the same swimming pool that sprung a leak, and that's why I have to go to Paradise Towers, aren't we? That's long-term continuity, isn't it? You haven't got the Judy Colmore wig for the Paradise Towers swimming pool anymore.
Missed the trick there, James.
Oh, there'll be other stories.
I mean, I'm halfway to Leela because I mean, if I took it off, that would be like a sort of Sever team thing. I could. No, we'll move it on. So, do you have any last thoughts on Doctor Who and the Invasion of Time?
No.
It's not a great exit for Leela, but I think she probably as a character has gone to the extent she's going to go with it. I don't feel bereft at the end of this that we're denied another season of her. I think she's had some great stories and it's time for a change. I don't feel. I wish I'd seen what she made of the Rebos operation.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think you're right. It was the right sort of time, and I do think this season in particular, she's been given. I feel she's been given a bit more service in the stories than she was in the previous season.
Do you think she's had a better time in Underworld and the Invasion of Time than she has in the Robots of Death and the Talons of Weng Chiang?
No, I don't think it's a couple of good she has some great lines in this season, as we've talked about already in our reviews of this season.
Because they have no feelings. That's Robots of Death. He can't speak. Has anyone told him that? It's a great line. Robots of Death. Anyway, Jason's getting huffy now, everyone.
I never get huffy.
I'm just going to pass the spade over.
I think I need a little paddle with Huff alert on it. Okay, then let's have some scores, and this decides, folks, who the winner of season 15 is.
Well, there's absolutely no pressure here, then, is there at all? So we have got to the end of the season, and it goes out with a little bit of a plotty 6-part that's been hastily pulled together. However, there are some nice redeeming features in this story. I do like the fact we've gone back to Gallifrey, even though it's just a case that we've rolled the sets out from the previous season before. And, you know, we get to see a bit of outer Gallifrey. We get to see some fabulous, not so fabulous interior bits of the TARDIS. And the story feels like it's a story of two halves. And actually, I think we've thrown away a good opportunity to not bring the Centaureans in sooner. However, on the whole, it's not the worst. And it's one that I remember reasonably fondly. So, you know, that always plays well. I think we see the departure of Leela, but I do think that the dynamic of Tom and Louise in this story, as has been in the previous stories this season, has been pretty good, even though potentially fractious behind the scenes. So long story short, I'll score it quicker than the story takes to go. I'm scoring The Invasion of Time a very interesting 6.
Oh my God.
An interesting 6.
I felt like I'd been time looped then for a moment.
I told you to paint on the eyes. I said, paint on the eyes. Just you'll be fine. An interesting 6.
Interesting 6.
Okay. I thought after that build-up, it was going to be a bit higher than that. Is this a 10 out of 10? No, but there are things I really like about this, and if you try not to think about the Vard and Sontaran and who does what and etc., you know, as we've talked about, there are some great performances here. I always like stories that feature Gallifrey, feature other Time Lords, go into the TARDIS. Okay, some of the scenes in the TARDIS are literally just running down hospital corridors, or in a leisure centre, tripping over more plastic garden furniture. Something about Gallifrey that they love the plastic white furniture and stuff. But there's enough in here to keep me going for those 6 episodes. I like the reveal. I think had that not happened, I probably would have gone, is there more to this? And I like the fact that this is the first time that there's some Tyrants are really a credible threat, really a risk to the Time Lords, which does put them up there with like the Daleks and the Cybermen, which is good. It sort of gives them that credit. I scored this slightly more generously than yourself, Jason, and I gave this a 7.
It's tense. It's a close finish. That's all I'm going to say. Yes, I can't even see what I've written down here. It's 7. I can't even read because I was adding that up. I don't think it's the greatest thing. I don't think it's an awful thing. I'm sort of on the fancy here with it in a lot of ways. I don't mind watching again if it, when it comes around on the old Blu-ray. I don't mind putting it on. It's just a bit thrown together. It's not unloved, and I think everyone's doing. There's lots of good performances and there's nice design and cheap TARDIS walk around aside. I mean, there is a lot of padding with all that. I think it's all right. It's above average, but it's not great. So I gave it a 6. A solid 6, not an interesting 6.
A solid 6, yes.
I'm not the stingy one this time.
No, you're over generous.
Yeah,
it's a failing.
Give there with you, isn't it?
Which means, everybody, hold on here. Hold on. This is a ride. Rock bottom, 6th place. It is Underworld with 5 points.
It's the right place. It's in the right place.
I'm not
I
even
love the script, though.
I was looking for positives.
Oh my days! If you say that one more time, I'm going to come through this too. I'm going to scream at you. In 5th place, with 14 points is the invisible enemy, which wasn't invisible because you could all see it.
Shrimps in space.
It was.
In 4th place, on 19 points, the Invasion of Time.
Oh, not our top one of the season then.
It just half a point ahead of it in 3rd place is the Sunmakers. It's close. Which means 2nd place goes to Image of the Fandal on 26.5, and it means it opened well and ended badly. Horrorfang Rock wins it with 28 points.
Very deserved, in my opinion. Yeah. Bloody good story.
Not as good as Image of the Fandal, but then we know that I'm always right, so that's okay.
Well, I'm a sucker for a good script.
I think if you'd have ended that before the halfway point. Anyway, thank you very much for anyone who stuck with us for this. I hope you enjoyed it. Put your comments and your thoughts below. Thank you guys for joining again.
Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.
Indeed, it is always a pleasure.
Could you have enunciated any more to get the camera?
James stole my camera.
Oh, get over yourself.
Oh, behave.
Right, I'm off to Marianne Dredd. We've texted twice. And we will see you again next week for the next season.